Welcome to episode 5 of the One and One College Basketball Podcast. I'm Justin Albaum here with Logan Kamelhar. And last week was exciting in college basketball. We had Feast Week. Everyone, if you don't like Feast Week, don't talk to me. Feast Week's actually amazing. Tournaments going on everywhere. So we're gonna get right into it. So this is technically part of Feast Week. Not a tournament game, but a non-conference game. Gonzaga faced UCLA. Gonzaga blew them out. Wasn't even close. The game started. We were up by like 10. The game was over. I want to hear what you think about this game, Luke.
I'm gonna say it's definitely more props to Gonzaga than negative to UCLA because I think UCLA is still solid. I think they play basically any other team in the country. They're not losing by 20. There's no shot.
Yeah.
I think just they don't have the play style. They don't play the way you need to play to beat Gonzaga. I mean, Gonzaga's going to run and they're going to get out in transition. They're going to get easy buckets. They're going to get rebounds and go in transition. And if you can't kind of do that with them, and then you really don't really have a shot to beat them. Yeah. I mean, unless you shoot an absurd percentage from the field and they can't get defensive rebounds and go in transition, it's tough. So I feel like unless UCLA was on fire and no one was missing, I don't think UCLA is beating Gonzaga. I feel like not many teams can. I feel like only really a few teams can even run with them. But I guess we'll see because they do have a few more. Does Gonzaga play a few more non-conference games?
Yeah, they have obviously they have Bama coming up this week.
They have Bama, yeah.
And then their conference. I mean,
it's better than usual.
Conference.
It's not as bad as it usually is.
Yeah, it's not a bad conference this year. Like obviously St. Mary's is pretty good, so we'll give them a break there. In my opinion about this game, it's pretty simple. If you can't run with Gonzaga, you're going to get blown out. It's just that simple. If you try to slow down, Texas try to do it. You try to slow down the game, you're going to lose by a lot. It's just how it's going to work against Gonzaga this year. So if you game plan going into the game, you're going to try to slow down. You're going to try to, I guess, I don't even know how to describe it. Like you can't like mentally bring them down to not be able to run transition. You're going to lose the game. Andrew Nembhard has looked insane that game. He looked. I don't even remember him missing a shot. He was so good.
Yeah.
I think Rasir Bolton is one of the most underrated players in college basketball. He's been a double-digit scorer the last 4 years in college. Penn State's freshman year, Iowa State the last 2 years. We'll talk about them later. And then now at Gonzaga, he's averaging double figures again. Drew Timme dominated Miles Johnson. I said it last week. I thought Miles Johnson was one of the best interior defenders. He didn't look that insane. He didn't look bad, but he didn't look that insane. Chet was okay. He obviously in 15 points, not bad. I just think that Gonzaga this year, they are superior to UCLA, and I think UCLA is definitely a little overrated. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to talk about the next game that Gonzaga played a couple days later. Neutral site. These games were a neutral site, so there's really no home court advantage here. The next game was Gonzaga-Duke, and obviously Duke ended up winning that game by 3 points. My opinions on this game, Duke was able to run in transition and keep up with Gonzaga. They ended up winning the game. It's just how it's going to work all year. Trevor Keels looked good. Obviously, Keels looked good. His shot was a little off. He missed a couple free throws, but you just felt like he doesn't feel like a freshman to me. He plays like he's a senior. It's pretty insane. Bonchera, I mean, he's the best player in college basketball. It's just that simple. He does everything right. it was unfortunate that he cramped up because he could have had like 50 points. He was so phenomenal.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear what you thought. Not, I guess about the game, but I want to hear how do you agree with me that the transition is important, and do you think that Duke could stay as the number one team for the rest of the year?
Um, okay, so to answer both those questions, the transition is very important.
Yeah.
I don't think you can be Gonzaga without getting a transition unless you get lucky and shoot a crazy percentage from the field, which is very unlikely. So unless that happens, you got to run in transition. And Duke is a team that can do that with them. And I feel like they showed that they were human in half court offense. Like if you could get them to have to play half court, they're not as good because I mean, obviously they're still a top 3 team in the country. They have players like that, but if you could get them kind of to use the smaller court where they don't have as much space to pass and move around and run, they're not as dominant of a team. I mean, they're just so dominant in transition because they're the best passing team I've ever seen in my life. Like they just know where they are at all times. Like it's crazy. But I feel like Duke got them to be in the half court. They ran with them. They kind of forced them to play a real played offense and
Yeah.
not just transition, which they struggled with for a little bit in the first half. They did get it in the second half. They did look pretty good, but overall, you have to be able to run with them. And on the other side, Duke, I don't think they hold number one all year. I mean, mainly just because they're gonna lose at some point.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna play tough games. Like I think it's a lot easier for a team like Gonzaga to hold number one all year than a team like Duke. Duke plays a lot more teams that will compete with them. And honestly, I mean, they are very deep. I think they're very deep defensively, but offensively, the production definitely struggled. They struggled with half court offense when they did get deeper into their bench. Like
Yeah,
when
for sure.
Bonchero was off the court in the second half, like
Joey Baker's not that great. So like,
yeah,
yeah.
their offense looked very like stagnant. It didn't look smooth. Like
Mhm.
it was a lot harder for them to score because I mean Wendell Moore is good, but aside from Wendell Moore and Bonchero on that team, which two playmakers is really good, I don't really trust the other guys to go make a play and get a bucket if they need a bucket. Like
Yeah, for sure.
Jeremy Roach is good, but couldn't really finish his. He had great moves, didn't really finish that well. I mean, Mark Williams, he's good in the post,
Yeah.
but it's hard to rely on that. And I mean, Keels, he could shoot. He kind of one dimensional, drives to the basket. I feel like a little out of control sometimes. Got foul calls because he's the biggest guard I've ever seen in my
Guard. Yeah.
life.
So he's like a horse. It's insane.
And then, I mean, other than that, their team's not very offensive minded, which isn't a big deal. I
Yeah.
mean, like, they're a very good defensive team. So I think that is okay. But overall, I think without Bonchero and more on the court, their offense is very stagnant
Yeah.
and I think they could struggle if Bonchero does cramp up and or there's foul trouble somewhere. I think they could lose some games to that.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I do think right now they're the best team in the country. I think I'm being very nitpicky when I'm saying these things because I mean I don't think any team really has all that what they have. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if Duke, in my opinion, though, if Duke neutral site again, if Duke played Gonzaga 10 times in a season, I still think Gonzaga would win 7 out of 3. Let
also Gonzaga ran into foul trouble,
Yeah.
which really hurt them.
I mean, Drew Timmy was like didn't play the entire game. Like he was hurt. So like yeah, like Duke did dominate the game though. That's the thing. Like Duke was dominant the entire game. They wouldn't let Gonzaga go on that huge run to take a massive lead. Like they really controlled the glass. They played the defense well. And honestly, in that game, we probably saw 6 to 7 NBA players, in my opinion, in that game. I mean,
I agree.
Like, I think there was a lot of star power in that game. Great game to watch. America needed that game. It's just college basketball. That's a game that everyone needed to see. Perfect. So next thing we're going to talk about, Feast Week, tournaments, a bunch of different tournaments going on. The Maui Invitational was a good one to watch. We got to see Houston, Oregon, Wisconsin, St. Mary's all in this tournament. We thought that Houston was going to win that tournament, no problem. We also thought Oregon would get to the finals. Oregon stinks. They suck. They'll get better. They have a great roster where they will get better, but they were terrible that tournament. Terrible all across the board. Wisconsin looked amazing. I want to talk about Wisconsin a little bit as Big Ten play is coming up soon. In my opinion, Johnny Davis and Brad Davidson is an unreal guard combo right now for Wisconsin, and could be an issue as Big Ten play comes along. In my opinion, Johnny Davis could be a first team Big Ten player. Like he averaged 20 something points that tournament, clear MVP, beat Houston, which I couldn't believe happened. I mean, Houston, you just felt that Houston was experienced. Obviously Wisconsin's experienced. I mean, Brad Davis has been there for 63 years. And Johnny Davis is only a sophomore. So like they still have experience, but I was just shocked that Wisconsin ended up winning the whole tournament. I wanted to hear your opinion on how that tournament went.
I think 9 times out of 10 Houston still beats Wisconsin. I feel like they showed up in the first half, and to be honest, Davis didn't miss a shot. He didn't miss a shot in the first half. He may have missed one shot, but like he was on fire, and they went up by 20, and Houston did end up coming back in the second half, but I'm not really necessarily surprised that Wisconsin kind of did show that they were at that level, because when you do have a guard at the level of Davis and then old veteran guard in Davidson, I feel like it's tough to be bad in college basketball, especially with like in Wisconsin's a Big Ten team. They have other players. Like they're gonna play. They're gonna upset some teams. They're gonna win a lot of games. They'll make the tournament. Like I'm not necessarily surprised that they went out and showed this week, but I didn't know it would be in that fashion. I didn't know, because usually Wisconsin's a very experienced, all 5-year player, 4 or 5-year players. Like, it's a little different this year. They're a little younger, but their younger players came to play. Like
for sure,
they came to play. They showed up.
Tyler Ball played well too. He's been there for a little. I think he's a junior or senior, so he showed up. They have that freshman guard. It's just when you watch that tournament, the first game of the entire tournament was Wisconsin Texas A&M, and Texas A&M went up like 20 early, and I was like, oh, this is Wisconsin this year. They have that one veteran leader. They have a good score in Johnny Davis, and the rest of their team can't do anything else. They can't play defense. Texas A&M was scoring at will. Texas A&M never scores at will, especially with Buzz Williams. Like Buzz Williams is he's a defense guy. He's not a scorer. Like they're not an offensive type team. And then Wisconsin decided to go on like a 17-3 run in the first half. And it was like, all right, Greg Gard in Wisconsin might be back this year. And they showed it. I thought St. Mary's is a very underrated team. I think Gonzaga That's a team Gonzaga. If they're worrying about any team, it would be St. Mary's in that tour in their conference. But I was impressed with Wisconsin throughout that tournament. Oregon sucks. I can't explain how bad they played so far. But Houston, on the other hand, as we talk about the AAC a little bit, they're a good team. They're a really good team.
They're a really good team.
AAC is going to be pretty good this year. And I wanted to bring up the AAC now to bring up the next tournament we're going to talk about, which was the NIT at the Barclays Center. It was Memphis, Iowa State, Xavier, and Virginia Tech. Memphis is the most overrated team I have ever seen in my life. Everyone hypes up this team. I understand Jalen Duran, top 5 pick, fine, Amani Bates, whatever. Obviously, he can't declare for the draft this year because he's only 17, but the year after, he'll be a first-round pick for sure. Amani Bates is the most overrated player. Like, the amount of hype coming out of high school with this kid, and listen, and I'm not saying this because he committed to Michigan. I'm obviously a Michigan State fan. He commits to Michigan State, decommits, and then he plays for the worst head coach in college basketball in Memphis. Amani Bates has looked terrible. I mean, he can't play defense. He's skinny. He's a very selfish player, strictly ISO ball. And do I think he'll get better? Yeah. I don't think Penny Hardaway is the coach to make him better. I don't think he's just that type of coach. He's not really – you would think he'd be a player development coach with the amount of recruits and insane recruits that he's gotten, but he really hasn't developed anyone that amazing. Like, he just hasn't. I think that they're a really overrated team. I think that they're barely a top 3 team in the AAC, in my opinion. I want to hear your thoughts on the AAC and, I guess, Memphis.
I mean, I don't think Memphis is a great team in general. I mean, I agree with you, but I think it's crazy to me that people thought Amani Bates would be good right now. Like it's crazy to me to think that you would expect a 17-year-old kid who's supposed to be barely a senior in high school to come into college basketball and even dominate like a lot of people expected him to. Like, people thought he was going to come in and be one of the best players in the country, but I think the reason why people are saying that is because the media hypes him up. Yeah,
he agree. 6'9" KD handles. Like, of course everyone's gonna hype him up and be like that guy, but he just like hasn't even looked remotely close to that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and obviously they have the talent. I mean, they're one of the most like talented teams in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, like, but that doesn't win you games in college basketball. Like, that's not what wins. Like, especially when you're that young. Like, it gets proven week in and week out that anybody could beat anyone. And when you're that young and not well coached, like, it's tough to win a lot of games, especially in the AAC, which isn't a Power 5 conference, isn't the Big East, which technically isn't a Power 5 conference either. But
yeah.
But they are a very good conference. Like, they're a competitive conference. I mean, Houston went to the Final Four last year out of the AAC. Cincinnati's been good the last, I don't know how many years, but they've always been competitive. I mean, I don't like to be biased, but UCF does look solid this year.
No, they have a good roster.
They're going to be a competitive team. They have a chance to make the tournament. I mean, like, I think you can't just say Memphis will come in and just win because of their talent, because I mean, that's just not the case. I think they will struggle if they don't change something right now, because I mean, they're definitely not looking too great.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't think Memphis is going to make the tournament. I really don't think they're anything special. But the weird part about this team is that there is experience. Alex Lomax, the senior, Lester Quinones, who is a great player, grew up in Long Island. He's a great player. He's a junior. They bring in Tyler Harris, who went to Memphis his freshman year, transferred to Iowa State, and came back to Memphis. He's like a fifth year senior. They bring in Earl Timberlake, who was a freshman last year in Miami, now a sophomore. Landers Nolly Jr. From Virginia Tech. They have so much talent, so much experience, but they don't mesh well together. It's a lot of iso ball, selfish players. I hate Penny Hardaway. I don't think he's a good coach at all. I think that, and it's hard to fire him, even if they don't make the tournament, because he brings in so much talent. I mean, he recruits. The way he recruits is one of the best in the country for sure.
Yeah, it's just crazy because you say all that experience, like, which I agree, there is a lot of experience, but it's not a lot of great experience. It's just a lot of time. I mean, like Memphis hasn't, like the guys that have been at Memphis, they haven't really done anything.
Bro,
Like
you're right.
they didn't even make the tournament last year.
They haven't made the tournament in a couple of years.
They haven't made the tournament in a couple of years. Like other guys, like I mean, a guy from Miami, they haven't been good.
Yeah, they haven't been good.
I mean, Iowa State's been all right, but like none of this like experience is great experience. Plus, with all the transfers and the freshmen, like it takes a lot of time to mesh them together, which you kind of saw with Kentucky last year. Like they had almost the most talented team like coming in you could ever say you've ever seen because they had five stars, a bunch of transfers, and they sucked. I mean, obviously COVID didn't help them, but I mean, I think it's a similar situation where you have all this talent and from all these places, but they're going to need to come and eventually play together and be a team, or else they're not going to win.
Yeah, you do bring up a really good point there. That experience, you're right. It was just time for these guys. Also, Dexter was another guy who's like he's been there for like 6. Like he went to Evansville, transferred. He's like a 6th-year senior. But you're right. I mean, these guys don't have NCAA tournament experience. They don't have bright light experience, but they have been in college for a while. They've played at these big schools. I would just expect them to be better when you bring in an insane recruiting class and portals. So moving on to the last tournament, I thought was the best tournament of Feast Week, Battle for Atlantis. You had 8 teams every team was good. Every game was competitive. I don't even know where to start because every game was good. The first game was Michigan State, Loyola, Chicago. 2 great teams there. I think Loyola is going to be really good this year. I think they'll make the tournament. Michigan State looked great. Auburn, UConn was a very, very good game. It went to 3 overtimes. I want to talk about that game a little more just because of Jabari Smith, who is, in my opinion, Jabari Smith is the second best prospect going into the draft. I think he is better than Chet Holmgren. If you watch the game, the tournament was each team was able to play 3 games in it. So Auburn, they lost to UConn, and VCU beat Syracuse. So Syracuse played Auburn. If you watch the Syracuse-Auburn game, Jabari Smith single-handedly took down that zone. You put him in the middle, he can shoot a mid-range, he can dump it off to his big man, he can shoot a 3 if you need him to. He was spectacular the entire tournament. I think that Auburn, they're not very experienced. They got a lot of transfers, but they have a lot of good recruits. When Alan Flanagan comes back, they could win the SEC, in my opinion. Like, that's how good that team is. I want to hear your opinion on the tournament as a whole. Obviously, I didn't mention Baylor, but I want to hear what you think.
I mean, I'll start from the top. I mean, the first game, Michigan State, Loyola. And I mean, I feel like some people that don't always watch would expect Michigan State to be the better team. I mean, but it's tough, especially going in when Denzel Valentine's brother is coaching Loyola
Yeah.
Chicago, who was, I want to say, somewhat part of that coaching staff for a little bit
Yeah,
at Michigan State.
he was a grad assistant
Yeah,
at
so
Michigan State.
that meant that game meant a lot to him in general. And Loyola Chicago is not a bad team at all. Not as good as they've been, but definitely
Still
not a
very
bad team.
experienced.
Very, very hard fought game. Michigan State came out on top. Um, I mean, that was just a good game to watch. I don't have anything very specific to say. Then moving on to UConn Auburn, I think that showed a lot of positives from both teams. I mean, only one team could win, but they both fought back and forth. It showed a lot. I mean, UConn on one hand, they had a big man. I'm blanking on his name right now. You definitely know his name.
Um,
They said it like 80 times during the
on
game.
UConn,
Yeah.
Sonogo,
Yeah,
Adama
Sonogo in
Sonogo.
the middle. I mean, they have RJ Cole is a very experienced guard. I mean, they have number 24, I forgot his name exactly, coming off the bench who actually made every shot he took
Jackson.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.
He
Martin
could
was great.
score. I mean, and then on the other side, Auburn, this Auburn team looks a lot like the teams Bruce Pearl has had in the past, the 5 seed that made the Final Four. I mean, when you look at the teams Bruce Pearl has coached, you could look at Jabari Smith, big guard, similar to guys like they were talking about it during the game, similar to guys like Okoro, guys that are bigger but could still handle and guard 1 through
And
5.
shoot.
Chuma Okiki, who's now on the Magic. I mean, bigger guards. I mean, not necessarily guards, but guys that can play any position, could shoot the ball. I mean, two little guards that played with phenomenal intensity for how long was that game? 40, 55 minutes.
Yeah.
They probably played like 45 of those
Yeah.
55 minutes. I mean, they were getting Jared Harper comparisons. So, I mean, this is a very Auburn, Pearl oriented team. So I think they could, especially with Jabari Smith getting better throughout the season and taking more of a role, I could see them going as far as anyone this year.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at the bottom side of the bracket, Baylor played Arizona State. Arizona State kept it close in the first half. Baylor ran away. Then VCU Syracuse is actually a really good game. VCU has lost their 3 best players going into the season. Their 3-4 record looks ugly, but they play hard. They beat Syracuse, lost to Baylor in a close game, lost in overtime to UConn. I mean, they're a very competitive team. The championship ended up being Baylor Michigan State. And going into that game, I was like, Baylor has played slow and fast at times this year. I thought that Michigan State would be able to speed up the tempo like they always do and make the game close to Baylor. Baylor they were so ready for that. They did
Mhm.
everything correct. They played fast with Michigan State. They slowed the game down. They knew when to slow the game down. They look so good. If I had to pick a team right now to win the entire thing, it would be Baylor to go back to back.
Yeah.
I mean, they just do everything right. They have the experience. They have a little star power. I think that Adam Flagler is great. I think Akinjo's a stud. SoCan is an underrated piece. They have a top 30 recruit. This Scott Drew is an unreal head coach. He really turned around a Baylor program that was terrible years ago. And now it's like the hot spot. You want to go to Baylor now. I mean, they're good every single year. I've just loved what I've seen out of Baylor. Michigan State, they still played well. I was very happy with them this tournament. They did what they needed to. You win the first 2 games, then you try to compete with Baylor. They couldn't, which is fine. But I was impressed. That tournament was insane. I think Baylor's a serious team
Mhm.
to watch out for the rest of the season. Come Big 12 play. Um, that basically wraps up Feast Week. It's such a great week. If you love college basketball, it really is amazing. It's Thanksgiving. You eat, you watch college basketball, you watch NFL. It's awesome. Now moving on to the matchups this week. The slate is interesting because you have the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Um, a lot of good teams from both these conferences. But the first game I want to talk about, which is Tuesday, is Duke at Ohio State. Ohio State this year has been very up and down. They lost they lost one of their better players. Not for the season. He's gonna be coming back. Justice Suing, who was great last year on the defensive end, can guard 1 through 4. Um, they also don't have Seth Towns, the transfer from Harvard. He's been having injury issues for so long. But Ohio State has looked pretty good. They beat Seton Hall, played a very great game of Florida, an unreal buzzer beater in that game. It
That was
just sums
wild.
up college basketball. And they get a home game against Duke. Now, Duke is insane. We talked about them before. But the more I look at this game, this is looking like a letdown spot for Duke. I don't know. What do you think about this game?
Um, I was gonna say in general, if you just look at this game for both teams, for Ohio State, I mean, if they could play a competitive game with Duke and show that they're at the level of these top level teams, that would be a win for them. I mean, especially for EJ Liddell and his future draft NBA aspirations, if he could go and play Duke and play with these level players and have a good game, I mean, that would be great for him and Ohio State moving forward. For Duke, I mean, it's still you're going to Ohio State. It's going to be a packed house. They're going to be rooting against you. It's very good experience for future games. Um, I don't know if Ohio State really has what it takes right now to beat Duke. I still don't think they're at their peak level of performance for the season. I think they're still getting better. They're still finding themselves. I think it could be a competitive game. I mean, like two top 25 teams playing each other can always be competitive. Anything can happen. It's college basketball. I just think Duke still ends up on top, but I think Ohio State could definitely keep it competitive throughout most of the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just the home games in college basketball, they're just different. I do like Ohio State in this spot. They're coming off which they played unreal in that tournament they played in Florida. An unfortunate buzzer beater that Florida hit for Ohio State, but it showed a lot about their team. I mean, it showed that they can beat a top team like Seton Hall without one of their best defenders. So I think Ohio State. I actually really I really want to say that they are going to win this game. I definitely think they can win this game. Duke is very good. I'm very excited to watch that game actually because I think that it's interesting because Duke can run the floor. Ohio State's transition defense isn't amazing. I just think it's going to be a really good game. My prediction is Ohio State's going to win. That's my final prediction. They're going to win the game. Um, Moving on to the next game, Alabama plays Gonzaga. It's a neutral site. I'm pretty sure it's a neutral site. The game is in Washington, so it is a neutral site. It does favor Gonzaga, of course. This game's an interesting one. Bama can run the floor with Gonzaga. And I'm gonna name 5 teams off the top of my head that can compete with Gonzaga just because of how fast they play. It's Baylor, Bama, Duke. I'm blanking on the other 2 teams. Logan, if you want to help me out, we talked about this the other day.
We talked about it. We said Kansas
Kansas for sure,
and
and there's one more. I'm blanking on it right now. But
Oh, yeah,
yeah, those four teams um, can compete with Gonzaga because of how fast. Also, UCLA. If I think UCLA will get better, I think they can still
yeah,
compete with Gonzaga. But this game is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. Both teams just running back and forth like maniacs. It's going to be great to watch. Bama hasn't looked great this year, though, to be honest. They do have experience coming back. Shackelford, Javon Quigley. They have a freshman, JD Davison. So they have a guard-heavy roster. They got Noah Gurley from Furman, who was great at Furman the last couple of years. He played in the NCAA tournament as well. So I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think Gonzaga is going to win the game. I want to hear your thoughts.
I think it's going to be close in most aspects of the game. I think Alabama will be able to run with them. They'll be able to transition, get back on defense. I think that won't be the issue. I think the issue will be in the half court. I don't think Alabama has anyone that could stop Chet
Exactly.
or Timmy.
Yeah.
I think they have the speed, but they don't have the size. They have the guards, but inside, I think Timmy and Chet will just dominate. Mostly Timmy. I mean, if you don't have a big man
Timmy's
that
gonna
can
murder.
guard Timmy, he's going to destroy you. So I think they'll be competitive offensively and running with them and getting them to slow down and play half court. But I just think Timmy's going to be too good inside,
Yeah.
and that'll win the game for Gonzaga.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing about this game could be is that Bama could go down early, but they're a type of team that can fight. They're like one of the only teams, in my opinion, that can fight back with Gonzaga because off those missed shots by Gonzaga, Bama can run the floor and get 2 points in 3 seconds. Like it's just like that's just how this game is going to work out. So if Gonzaga goes down, it goes up 10. I can see Bama sneaking back to cutting into 3 or something like that.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a very fast paced game, which who doesn't love to see that. It's like
yeah,
that was like the LSU Bama game last year where just Bama put up like 110 points. It was just very fun to
yeah.
watch. Moving on to the last game, I wanted to bring up this game. One, I'm going to the game. It's at UBS Arena in Long Island. I'm excited to watch this game. It's Kansas at St. John's. I think that this is going to be. I think it's going to have a pretty solid crowd this game. Kansas coming off a really bad loss against Dayton, who's lost to 3 really bad teams: Austin, PA, Lipscomb. They've lost to a bunch of non-conference teams that are under 500. Dayton has. I think that Kansas is still very good. Jalen Wilson is now back. He was suspended a couple games. He's now back. He's coming off the bench right now. I think that Kansas needs to make a change at guard. Joseph Yusufu, I believe that's how you see his last name, coming from Drake. He's been playing very minimal minutes, like 5 or 6 minutes. He's so much better than that. I actually think they should start him, or he should be the first guy off the bench if they want to start Jalen Wilson or not, depending on how they want to do that. And St. John's, on the other hand, they're going to play quick. That's how they play. That's how Mike Anderson plays. They have a bunch of great guards. Aaron Wheeler, Champagne's insane. Montez Mathis. They have a good roster. I want to hear your opinion on this game.
I think this is a big game for both teams. I mean, this is the best team, arguably the best team St. John's going to play all year. They're going to play Villanova twice. They're going to play UConn twice. The Big East is solid. They're going to play Seton Hall. They're going to play all those teams. So this is a very good matchup for them to see where they are against these top-level teams going into conference play because they're going to have to play these teams. And if they're going to have to get a win in a couple of these games to stay competitive, and I think they can. I mean, they have Champagne, who I think in college basketball right now is one of the best scorers in the country. I think
Yeah.
he starts on almost any team in the country right now. He's putting up like 25 points a game. So if he could play at that level against Kansas and they could keep it competitive, I mean, I think St. John's can win.
Yeah.
I don't think Kansas loses two big games like that in a row. I think Kansas will fix up the things they have to fix up. They will fix their free throw shooting because 9 for
Yeah.
20 is
Average
not
is terrible.
going to win
Can't win
games.
games like that.
But I do think it will be very competitive. I think St. John's will definitely come to play. And I mean, they're not like a low level team. They're a competitive Big East team. They could come in and beat anyone on any given day.
Sure.
So it's definitely a tough game for Kansas going into St. John's in a new arena. I mean, I want to say St. John's is 5-1.
Yeah.
They've only lost one game this year,
Mhm.
so I mean, it's big for both teams. Kansas definitely doesn't want to lose two in a row like that.
For sure.
St. John's definitely wants to show where they are
Yeah.
in terms of who they can beat. So I think it'll be an exciting game.
Yeah.
Definitely better than most people probably would expect.
For sure. These games, it is early in the season. They're not in conference play yet. I know there's 7 games in both of these teams. You're still trying to get to know your roster and know your guys. But at the end of the day, especially for St. John's, this is a big game for them tournament wise. For your resume, St. John's, I would say, is a board. They're definitely in the. If there was a bracket right now, they'd be in it. They're close to the bubble for sure. If you can pull off a win against Kansas and put that on your resume and hold that for the rest of the year,
Mhm.
you don't understand how huge that is, that you can hold
Yeah.
on to that for the entire year. Because they lost a big one at Indiana. That would have been a nice game to have on their resume. So if you beat Kansas, you definitely give yourself a nice edge. Like you can afford to lose a bad game in the Big East, like against
Yeah.
Georgetown or Butler or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think this is a huge, huge game for St. John's. They want to make the tournament, and a huge game for Kansas too for their seeding, because they'll be in the tournament. But you lose to Dayton, it definitely affects your seeding. Now, if you got losses to Dayton and St. John's on your non-conference, it's like, all right, it's tough to put them back at a 1 seed. So that is gonna about wrap it up for episode 5 of the 1-on-1 College Basketball Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Peace out, Loke.
Peace.